Hi, I'm Allie Hamilton, and I'm so happy to welcome you to the Come As You Are podcast. Every week, we'll be talking about some aspect of healing, usually around childhood wounds and complicated familial relationships. The topics will always coincide with my personal essay of the week, and this will be a place where we can take a deep dive together. I'm so thrilled you've joined me and delighted for you to always come as you are. Hi there. Hi there. Welcome to our talk. Today the topic is thoughts and prayers. And, we've had another school shooting this week, and the school year just began. And that is what my essay was about, and that is what has been on my mind. And I have two school-age children, and my son is the same age that the kids in Sandy Hook would have been. And it has been it's just been an ongoing, constant source of anguish, and I'm incredulous that this is something we have allowed to go on and on and on. My children have grown up in schools where there are active shooter drills. It used to be like earthquake drills, and they still do those, but now we have active shooter drills. And I don't know if we can even understand. This has been going on for so long that somehow feels normal. It's not at all normal. This is not a normal thing for our kids to, have to be going through as a regular part of their educational experience. And I started to write about grief because I unfortunately, I have an up close and personal experience of what it's like to lose a child. And I wrote about that. And I've had other experiences along the way that have really shown me just the fragility, of life. I think that we tend to think of life as this, we take it for granted. We wake up in the morning and we get out of bed and we're breathing and we're putting our feet on the floor and we're going from point A to point B and we're having coffee and we're just, we've got our plans and we're doing our things. And it's so easy to live in this delusion that that's just how it is and how things are going to be, and kind of forget that anything, it can all change in an instant, and I don't ever want to be in the grip of that. It's a balance. There's a balance to being in your life and getting up and, focusing on the things that you're trying to accomplish, create, put out into the world, and also understanding that there is inherent vulnerability in the experience of being human. We're on this spinning planet in just one solar system in a vast, vast universe that is always expanding, beyond our comprehension, right? And we don't get to know how much time we have here. We don't get to know how much time anyone else has, even the people that we love more than we are able to even put into words. And that is a painful, those parameters are really difficult, to wrap your head around. And it's understandable that we like to push that kind of outside of our awareness. We don't like to focus on the fragility and the vulnerability and our own mortality. But I do think that part of living fully is understanding that it's a gift just to wake up in the morning, even if things are really hard. Um, and devastating, heartbreaking things happen no matter what. That too is part of the human experience. When we love people, we're, opting in, whether we're doing it consciously or not. We're opting in for the potential of grief because we don't last forever. None of us do. And so, yes, when you love people, there's always the possibility that you're going to be hurt. And it might be that an ending comes because you grow in different directions, if we're talking about like friendships or romantic relationships. But it can also be that people are taken from us without warning. So no one likes to dwell on that. But I do think that it's really important to not fully push that outside of your awareness either, because if you can find that right balance, then it inspires you not to waste time and not to hold back when you feel like you need to say something, not to be afraid to express your love, your care, your concern, whatever it might be. So it's a balance. And I think in our culture here in the United States, we really don't talk about our own mortality. It's not like part of the, the mainstream kind of conversation, but it probably ought to be more. And when you're talking about the loss of a child, I mean, that is, it's not the natural order of things. And I was talking about my own childhood, and the best sort of happiest memories from my childhood happened really before I was 4. And my mother's family, my maternal grandmother she was my mother's best friend. I saw her every day of my life. Either she came to us in New York City or we went to her. She lived in Jersey City. That's where my mother was born. My grandmother had a house at the Jersey Shore, and my aunt, my uncle, my 4 cousins also lived in New Jersey, and we would spend the summers at the shore. And so for those first 4 years of my life, spent a tremendous amount of time with my mother's family and, with her mother, my aunt, my uncle, my cousins, who were all a little bit older than I was. So that, they're like 4, 6, 8, 12 years older. So I was like the baby of the family. And I just have just the best memories from that time in my life. And my maternal grandmother was incredibly affectionate and warm and quick to laugh. And I mean, it's wild that I have such strong memories of her, and I only got to have her for 4 years. And she got breast cancer. She passed away right before my 4th birthday, and then sort of everything exploded in my life. My parents got divorced. My mom for a while wasn't leaning on my aunt and uncle, so there was a brief point in time where I didn't see them, but it was like a critical point. It was sort of like that first month after my parents split and my grandmother had died. I think maybe my mom was like ashamed to tell them that her marriage had failed. And really, I mean, it failed because my dad failed, so, but anyway, I think my mother felt a tremendous amount of like shame about that, and rage and grief, and obviously had lost her mother, who was her best friend, and my dad. So, it was, it was a rough time. I did then, after a while, she did again bring me to my aunt and uncles, and I was there a lot on the weekends. And so I really grew up with them. They were more like siblings than cousins. And my oldest cousin, he lost his son to brain cancer when he was 6 years old. And it is by far, I mean, just, it's all these years later. I was 25 at the time, and I still can't, it's still so painful to think about, talk about, write about. Um, and I saw someone that I grew up with. I saw the way he was hollowed out, and, that you don't forget that. And I mean, so I think that experience, really just gave me a window into what is possible in this world, and some of the things that some of us have to live through. He and his wife had another son. You just have to go on, there's no option of not going on, but you have to somehow go on with this like shattered, broken heart, and it's tough. And then when I got pregnant, I went through childbirth with my son. And I hesitate to talk about this too, because I never, if you happen to be pregnant while you're listening to this, I just want to tell you, like, I just had an extreme thing happen, and most people, like, everything, it's not like that. I don't want people to be afraid going into the situation, but I do always say to people who have a very serious birth plan, because I did. My birth plan was written out. I wanted no drugs. I wanted, just like low lights. I wanted to be able to move around and do yoga and squat and just do all kinds of, that was my vision. And I made everyone sign off on my plan. And it just, the way things went, nothing went according to my plan at all. And the way things were, for a variety of reasons, my son and I had a really very tough time where, I was in labor for 24 hours, and for the last 12 of those, it was very touch and go for both of us. And I could easily not be sitting here. He could easily not be going to college in 2 weeks. And so, and that experience was, I think, understood in a different way that we tend to think of like the living as this robust sort of experience that's happening, and like death as this finite thing, and then whatever's happening, it's like a separate. And my experience during those 12 hours was like, oh no, it's like a thin membrane between life and death, a very thin membrane. And you can cross it at any time. And even if you're healthy and you're, doing all these things to sort of support, it doesn't matter. Like, you are vulnerable, and it's not all up to you. Just like my birth plan, even though I had written it out and I had been like envisioning it and I made everybody sign off on it, it wasn't up to me. It doesn't work like that. It's good to have the vision and the plan and like hope that it goes that way, but it's also good to understand that it might not, and that ultimately what matters is that you're okay. If you're someone who's pregnant right now and your baby's okay, that's really it. But that experience of, being that close to death, like over and over again, it changed me. It just showed me that you really can't take anything for granted. And there was a point in time during my labor when I just started to pray that whichever way we were going, we would go together. And that's desperation, for you there. And that's also like surrender. I just realized like, okay, I'm doing everything I can here, and it's not up to me. And so thankfully we're both here, we made it, but it doesn't always work out that way. And I think that also stayed with me. And so I'm never confused. I have to work on not becoming overwhelmed by the vulnerability of being a human being on planet Earth. It's not like I don't ever forget that. I have to manage that awareness and not let it tip over into that place where I am in fear. I don't want to be in fear. I want to have faith that like I'm going to be okay. My children are going to be okay. If you have children, they're going to be okay. You're going to I don't want to move through the world in this fear and worry and anxiety. That's not it. Like that's not good for anyone. And so that's my work, is to manage that awareness and keep it in balance with joy and faith in just like hoping everything is going to be all right. Well, when you have school-age children and you are in a country that, for decades now is not doing anything about gun violence, it's brutal. You just every day you are kissing your children goodbye as you drop them off at school and silently praying over them that it's going to be all right. Now, look, I live in California and we have some of the best sane, gun control legislation in the country. And I'm still in this state because you can cross state lines. It's so easy to have access to guns. We have a gun culture here in America. We are, people love their guns, and it's like, and it's a whole Second Amendment conversation. I am like, I'm beside myself already. No one's coming for your guns. Like, no one's coming for your guns. No one's coming to your house and taking your guns away. Okay, that's not what anyone's asking for at this point, because it's not realistic. Buyback plans for people who opt in, that would be great, but no one's showing up at your door and denying you of your Second Amendment rights, which, by the way, were written well before we had the kind of guns that we have today. And the Constitution has been amended multiple times because the Founding Fathers knew we're writing this now and we don't know what the world is going to look like, in the future. So there's a lot of conversation to be had here. But I think what most people can agree on is we don't want weapons of war that are designed to kill as many people as possible in a short period of time, seconds. We don't want people to have easy access to that stuff. Civilians, okay? No civilian needs that. You don't need that for self-defense. You don't need that to go hunting. So please, enough. Like, your Second Amendment right should not infringe upon my children's right to live and make it through the day. And that is what people are asking for. It's just sane gun control legislation, background checks, red flag laws, a ban on assault weapons. And, I had somebody saying to me, like, there's no such thing as assault weapons. Okay, what we're talking about here, again, are like these weapons that are absolutely designed to wipe out as many people as possible in as short amount of time as possible. Those weapons, that's what we're talking about. And there are loopholes. There's all kinds of stuff going on here that is making this, so difficult to fix. And you can say all the things you want, but look at any other first world country. We do not have this going on. We don't. So, you can keep saying it's not the guns. It's the guns. It's easy access to the guns and multiple other things, certainly, factoring in. But we have a problem here. And just even in Georgia, okay, Georgia has some of the most lax gun regulation laws in the country. And I'm going to talk about something for a second. Brian Kemp, the governor, took $50,000 from Daniel Defense. And that's the company that manufactures the AR-15 used in Uvalde. Like, this is what's problematic. We need to get money out of politics. Citizens United did not help anything. Like, we had a lot of problems to fix here. A lot. It's overwhelming how many problems we have to fix in this country. But I'm going to tell you that, it is bad enough when you lose a child because they became ill, something happened, something dreadful. But to be losing your child because your country cannot get together on something that everyone should be able to agree on across every political spectrum and make kids safe at school, I don't know what to do with that. I haven't been able to sleep. Every time we have a school shooting, which is, every week, I it I'm not okay. And like no one should be okay because it's not normal. And this whole idea of like this is just part of life. No, it's not, okay? These things are not inevitable, and there are ways to fix this that are not putting more guns in school and having teachers carry guns and putting metal detectors up at like there we could do other things like have some sanity around this. And again, not like you keep them secure and locked away, and let's close up the loopholes and just make this a sane, safe world for our kids. We should all be able to get with that, and it is devastating that we can't, and we can't across so many areas. There are so many, just because of violence. People's children are dying all over the world, not just in this country. War, like there are so many different ways where you can lose a child through a violent act. And I don't know what could be worse than that, with having to live with the reality that your child's last few moments on this earth were spent in terror and you weren't there to help. There was nothing that you could do. It's like that is not acceptable on any level. And wherever children are dying in this world, adults are failing. The end. And it doesn't matter to me where the children are. If there are children dying because of violence, for any reason, the adults have lost the thread. The end. And we're failing. We are failing. So that's where I am, aside from all the other things that I have been so deeply concerned about and, just distraught, This one, the school shootings and it is so hard to, this just isn't, it's no, there's a good quote that I'm going to paraphrase right now, but it's like, it's not the sign of sanity to be okay in an insane world. Like if you're struggling, you're sane. This is not how things need to be. This is not how things should be. And not just with gun violence in this country, but just violence throughout the world. People who are more invested in self-interest than compassion and empathy. That's really the cancer in our world. That is, if you wanted to boil it down, it is rampant self-interest that is creating all the problems that we are seeing everywhere, in every area. When people are focused on their own well-being at the expense and exclusion of anyone else, when they are, lining their pockets, when they are going after resources in another country, or like it's all the same stuff. It's, I want mine. And so that's it. That's like my number one priority. And whatever else happens around that, I don't care. That is a sickness. And that is really ultimately underneath everything else. That's what we need to be addressing. We need to get to the root of that problem and understand that, you get maybe like 80 to 100 years on this planet. And while you're here, who do you want to be? Like, what are you doing? And I'm not talking to anyone who's listening, because if you're listening to this podcast, like, you're not, you're not the problem. You're already thinking about, how do we make this world a more sane, compassionate place? But I still think it's really important to speak out and to say it when things are not okay. And it is, it's like, it's the root of racism. It's the root of every awful, heartbreaking problem that we're having in this country and in this world, is people who are looking out for number one. And it isn't pretty, and it really does cross like all areas, because when you have someone like a Brian Kemp, who is looking out for himself and lining his pockets and taking these contributions, he took $50,000 in campaign contributions from a gun manufacturer, okay? And $25,000 of that he took less than a month before he signed his extreme, criminal carry law, his bill into law. Like, that makes it easier in Georgia for criminals to carry concealed weapons in public. This is not like, why would you want to make that easier? Where are you coming from? You're certainly not thinking about your constituents and their safety and their children. That's not what's going on. You are putting money in your pocket and you want to maintain your power. That's it. Well, people in our government, they're supposed to be public servants. That's the job description. You're supposed to go and represent the good of the people, right? That in your community, that's your job. We have so many people who that's not what they're doing. They're looking out for number one. And part of what has happened here is we have a disengaged electorate, and we have people who are like listening to somebody's words and then not going to check their actions. This man, after this shooting that happened, like, came out and said, "Oh, my heart is broken, and my wife and our hearts are broken." Like, no, sir, you don't get to do that. You don't get to say your heart is broken while you're lining your pockets with money from, gun manufacturers. It doesn't work like that. But people aren't checking to see where's the money coming? Like, where's the money? Follow the money, And he's just one. There's a lot of people that's what they're doing with their power. They're taking care of themselves and not the people they're supposed to be representing. And so, part of, I think, what I understand that, not everybody is in our country. It's like people want what they want. And if they don't hear exactly what they want to hear, like, well, I'm out. I'm not going to vote for anybody then. It's like, that's not it either, okay? You got to remember that when you are voting for a ticket, you're voting for an ideology. You're not voting for one person or two people. You're voting for, what is this party's philosophy and ideology? And let me see, do they back it up with the way that they're voting when they have an opportunity to vote on these things? Now, look, it's all a mess. In our government, it's a mess, because sometimes when a bill is brought to the Senate floor, it's got all these other things packed into it. It's got and we don't know that as the public. We're not, most of us are not reading these bills and seeing what else has been sort of like shoehorned in here. So sometimes you see people voting against things that have a title that feels like, oh, this would be, why are you not voting in favor of this? And then you find out, oh, because they like sort of shoehorned this other thing in that they wanted. And it's, I understand it's difficult. Like, I just was writing a couple of weeks ago about why the abortion bans are impacting people who are pregnant, who want to have a baby, and then are faced with a pregnancy-related emergency, and they go to the ER because they need a D&C to stop the bleeding, or a D&E, and they can't get one because D&Cs and D&Es are abortions. It's the same procedure that someone, gets if they are electing to have an abortion, or if they need life-saving medical care because they're pregnant, they wanted the baby, and now they're bleeding out. Like, it's not, none of, and people don't know. So many people were like, oh, I did not know that. So it's like, part of what's happening here is we have people who show up to vote every 4 years. They don't really pay attention in between. They're not looking at their local, elections. They're not looking at their state. Like, they're not looking at that stuff. And they're not really checking. They're just listening to the words coming out of somebody's mouth and like voting. And it's like turned into some kind of, there's so much hatred and division, and it's exhausting to be living here. And, sometimes often I express what I think and how I feel. I'm a writer. That's what you do, right? You express what you think and how you feel and why it is you feel the way that you feel. And I get attacked for it sometimes, and that's okay. Like, we're not all going to agree. But what does trouble me is when somebody is attacking me and they haven't even Googled something, like they haven't even double checked their information. That's tough, because it's like, well, you're going to go vote thinking this, and this is not, it's very easily provable or like unprovable. It's not hard, but people are just not engaging this way. So if you have someone and you're like, I like this person, I like what they're saying, well, go check and make sure that what they're saying, the words coming out of their mouth, their actions are lining up. Because in our world, a lot of the time they're not. And, thoughts and prayers, these thoughts and prayers people are the people who are taking money from gun manufacturers. And so it's like the money goes into the pocket on one hand and the words come out of the mouth on the other. And every time we have a school shooting and these people are, there's a press conference and somebody says, can we please talk about like the gun legislation that you signed? This is not the day for that. It's never the day for that. It's never the day for that. Those people need to be voted out. They need to go home. They don't care about your kids, my kids, anyone's kids. That's not why they're there. They're there for them. And all of those people need to go home. They don't understand the assignment. They don't know what their job description is, or they've long since forgotten. And, and here, the people here in our, what's supposed to be a democracy, like everyone needs to be more engaged. Are you going to get every single thing you want, from any ticket? No, probably not. But at least try to figure out, okay, what is this ticket's sort of like baseline philosophy here on things that matter to me as far as like a sane and compassionate world. So, gun violence for me, yeah, that's certainly there. Women's rights, yeah, certainly there. Climate change, yes. Climate crisis, like doing something active to address that, absolutely important to me. There's so many different areas. And on the global stage, what I can say for sure when I look at this is like, yeah, one ticket is going to be, there's zero hope there. Everything's going to get worse. And the other ticket, there's at least a chance here to get your voice heard and hold people accountable and get to work. We have a lot of work to do in this country, and we cannot do it with people who just, are abusing the power that they have. And I'm going to tell you, like, the people who benefit from these systems that are set up here, they don't want them. They don't want to dismantle this stuff. The patriarchy, white men in the patriarchy, a lot of them, not all of them, a lot of them don't want to see that change because they're holding the cards. And, I've been talking about this lately, but like, I get 69 cents on the dollar for doing the same job a man does just as well. No one can make that make sense. And there's only one message I can receive from that, which is I am not valued as highly as a man in this culture. There are a lot of men who they're not interested in seeing that change. It's like the change does not come from the top down. It comes from the people who are not doing well in the system, who get loud. And you can't just look at your own demographic. Like you got to look at everyone because for example, like white men are at the top of the food chain here, and then, we could talk about just men generally because of what I just was talking about. Most of the functionality in a patriarchy is set up for men. Then you have women, right? You have white women, and then you have women of color, and then you have, the LGBT. Like you've got to really think about who's behind me here too. Like what can I do with the amount of power I do have and the voice that I do have and the platform that I do have? Like how can I be pulling everyone up? Because this is no good what we have going on. It's no good right now. You look around the world, it's not hard to figure out whether we're doing well or we're not doing so well. And if you've only got 80 to 100 years on this planet, it's not yours. You don't get to take it with you. It's like you were given an opportunity here, to experience being human on this planet. And I don't think that you want to spend your time hoarding and being violent and then you die. I don't know, but I don't really think that's the best use of anyone's time. And to just ask yourself, what am I so afraid of? If you are afraid, what am I so afraid of losing? Why does it bother me if my neighbors are two happily married women? Like what is the problem? What are you worried about with tampons in a boy's bathroom? Like what are you actually worried about? Could you maybe worry about children huddled in the bathroom at school, afraid for their lives? Because that would be a thing to worry about. Or children who don't have enough food to eat. I mean, stop worrying about controlling women and their bodies and start figuring out what you can do to help everyone. That's, to me, like the happiest life you're going to have on this planet is a life where you are giving. You're giving, and you are in the face of all the vulnerability and grief and loss, which is certainly part of the equation. You are loving your heart out. That's a life that's going to feel good. A life where you are in fear and rage and hatred and bigotry. That, there's a lot of people living like that. And it's so disheartening when you engage with people who are in that mindset. And I have been, because I like I said, when you have a public platform and you are putting yourself out there and saying what you think and how you feel, look, for the most part, anyone who's been reading my stuff or taking my yoga classes online, or I've been blogging since 2009. I've written books. Anyone who's been following along here and reads the personal essays every week or listens, how I feel. So most of the people who feel very differently have left me a long time ago. They attack first and then they take off. So I don't get a lot of that, but I do get some, and it is just, it's disheartening and depressing when you are dealing with someone who's just so, they're just so kind of enraged and arrogant about it, and nothing you say matters or gets through. It's very hard, but I feel like it's still worthwhile to speak up and push back and to call it out when you see things that aren't okay. And for anyone to have to go through the agony of losing a child when it was preventable, I just can't. And again, I'm talking about on the microcosm and the macrocosm. We have so many grieving parents in this world because of individual violence and because of the violence and self-interest of our governments And with look, I understand we're in the world that we're in, and it isn't pretty, and I get it. I'm not in la la land. I know we can't just like snap our fingers and tomorrow all live in peace and love and harmony. I get it, but there ought to be some baseline level of humanity and decency and compassion no matter what is happening, where we're not othering people. And the minute you put someone outside the circle of humanity, you can do anything you want to them. That's how the Holocaust happened. That's how genocides happen. People get othered. They're not even human. They're animals. That's the philosophy there. That's devastating. Every single person who's born onto this earth has an equal right to live and grow and bloom and offer up their own personal spark. We only get one of each one of us. We don't get multiple copies. It's not like you could walk the whole earth today and never run into yourself again. There's only one of you. And that's like, miraculous, whether you want to think about it as a scientific miracle or a spiritual miracle. It's amazing in all of time too, not just right now, like ever. There's never been another you. There's never going to be another you. You are the only you we're going to get. That's amazing for every single person here. And so everyone deserves compassion and dignity and decency and equal access to like fresh air and clean water and a good education. There's enough to go around if we shared, but that's just not the world that we've created. We could have created anything, and we still can, but now is the time to try to like shift and redirect and get it together here. And so, opting out because you're not getting every single thing that you want, or you're not hearing everything that you want to hear, like, you gotta do better than that and try to like, understand. I'm not getting every single thing I want, but like, the ideology and the team and the, general philosophy. Yeah. Like, there's no contest here. There's no contest here. So I wanted to extend, really, if you have lived through the loss of a child, I want you to know that I'm so sorry. And I think sometimes people don't know how to handle grief. I know from my own experience, losing both of my parents in the last few years, and that's a normal sort of like, that's the way that's the natural order of things, right? Is like you lose your parents eventually, and that's brutal enough, and all the things that it brings up. But people don't even know how to like, many people don't know how to engage with you when you're grieving. And I think it kind of reminds them of their own mortality, like it's contagious or something. And guess what? It is. Like, everyone, no one's no one's making it out of here alive, right? Like, but when you lose a child, I think people, they don't know what to say. They are afraid they're gonna like remind the person, like if they ask, hey, how are you doing? I've talked to a lot of grieving parents, and obviously I know I have some close friends who have gone through this. You never forget. You're never going to be reminding a parent who, I forgot today. Like, there's not a moment of the day where they're forgetting. I met a woman, and I'm going to finish here, but I met a woman a couple months ago. I was with my son. He was getting his hair cut, and I was there at the hair place waiting. I was sitting there, and there was a woman sitting there waiting for her husband. She's just a little older. And so we started talking, and I said, it's my son. And she asked me how many kids I have. And I told her, I have a son and a daughter. And I said, do you have kids? And she said, yes. And I said, how many children do you have? And she said, well, I have 3. And she said, I hesitate to say that because one of them passed away. And I just, it's just instantly in tears, because it's like, even a question like that, she did ask me, and, I asked her, this is a normal question, like, oh, do you have children? Like, how many children do you have? Even just a simple question like that, it can be so painful and loaded for people who have lost a child. And I said to her, of course you have 3 children, of course you do. And like, tell me about it if you want to. And she did. She told me her daughter's name and what had happened. And I think people don't do that. They don't ask questions because they're afraid it's too painful. But I think for most people who have lost a child, they want to. They want this child that they are carrying with them every minute of the day in their hearts. They want this child to be known. They want people to know this person was here for a while, and this was their name, and this was their birthday, or this was their like favorite story that they always wanted to hear, or this, like they want to have a space to talk about the person that they are missing, more than anything in the world, and I'm not telling you to like pry. Sometimes somebody might not want to talk, but just if you have people in your life who have lost a child, that you're close to, you're never going to be reminding them. And it's always, I think, a beautiful thing to just ask, how are you doing today? And, can I do anything for you? Or do you want to talk about your child? Like, I think it's a beautiful way to honor the grief that this person is living with and the life of the child they lost, to give them the space at least to know that if they're having a tough time, you are a safe place to go. And if you are ever in a situation where someone is going through that loss, just to show up, not to ask what you can do, just to do, to send food, to show up with food, to, go and do the laundry, or if they have other children, to take their other children for, like, just do. Don't ask. Offer. Hey, would you like me to take the kids to, like, the amusement park for the day? Can I do your grocery? Like, I'm going to just drop groceries off. Is there anything you want me to get? Or like, I'm bringing lasagna. Like, just do things. Just do. Don't wait to be asked, or don't ask for suggestions. Just do something. Anyway, I'm really hoping that I'm just hoping that we can get it together here and start moving in a more compassionate direction for all of us, a more sane, kind, loving direction. It is not healthy to wake up every day and have the news break your heart. This is not like a normal way to live. And I think everyone's exhausted from the division, from the rage, from the lack of compassion, from the lack of humanity, from the vitriol that is coming out of the mouths of 2 men running for the 2 highest offices in the land. It is a constant daily onslaught of more just horrific messaging. It's intentional. There's no way around this now. You can't unintentionally keep blasting your hatred of women. This is not an accident. They're running on this ticket, and it isn't pretty, and it certainly isn't what we need. So that's where I am, and I'm always interested in where you are and how you're doing out there, and how I can support you. And I'm sending you a lot of love, and I'm sending a lot of love just out into the world as best I can in all the ways that I can. So, yeah, until next time.